All right. And hello and welcome to another episode of Checkpoint, the podcast highlighting and telling the stories of influential leaders in and around the sports industry. Today, we are excited to welcome our next guest, Adam Tschuor. Hopefully,
Sure. Yeah, sure, like a seashore. Yeah.
Hey, there we go. Adam is the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Administrations at the University of Dayton and assists Neil Sullivan with the day-to-day operations for Division of Athletics, ticket offices, and other strategic initiatives. Adam's a native of Muncie, Indiana. Shout out to our first guest, Haven Fields, representing Ball State, and is now helping the Flyers navigate through these uncharted waters in 2020. Adam, welcome to Checkpoint. How you doing today?
Great, Scott. Thank you for having me. I really, enjoyed listening to that podcast you had with Haven, and when you reached out, I was excited to have the chance to connect with you.
Amazing. And we'll start there. The power of 2020, there's silver linings in everything. And, this has been a tumultuous year for collegiate athletics, for our country, for humans. But there is silver linings. And, with Zoom and the power of connecting, we're here today, Adam, and I couldn't be more excited to, feature you on Checkpoint. And, just for all the listeners out there, the goal of our podcast is to really, highlight these influential leaders and hear their story, take a peek behind the curtain on how they got here, learn about what they're currently working on, and really see with their expertise where the industry is going to go over the next 3 to 5 years. So, Adam, if you're ready, let's take a dive into who you are and how you ended up here.
Let's do it.
Cool. So why don't you go ahead and start off by just telling us about your journey leading up to the University of Dayton, and maybe a few pivotal moments that shaped your career to land with what you're doing now.
Absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, born and raised in Muncie, Indiana. Grew up around college athletics, not with any family or anything that worked in it professionally, but my dad and my grandfather, uncles were all very involved with Ball State's athletics in terms of donations and going to events, and we're very active philanthropically. So as a kid, I was always going to my dad knew all the coaches really well. So me and my brother were always going to, Rick Majerus's basketball camp and, Pat Quinn's baseball camp and things like that. So spent a lot of time going and traveling a lot and grew up around it, and really gave at a young age a very close look at what being a student athlete, especially at the Division I level, looks like. And I became very enamored with it. And so by the time I got into middle school, I started dawning on me that that's what I wanted to be. I didn't necessarily have a goal in mind to serve as a sport. Most people, the genesis of it is they have a sport that they love and then they just try to grow in that field. I wanted to be a Division I athlete, so I tried them all, and was pretty poor at a lot of them, most of them, I'd say. I think football, I broke my arm first day of practice.
Man.
Fracture. That didn't work. 7th grade there. But I was pretty good at golf, and stuck with that. Was fortunate to get a few offers. Ended up at Creighton University, which is now in the Big East, but at the time was the Missouri Valley Conference School out in Omaha. I have a twin brother who also played. We were kind of a package deal. We both ended up at Creighton.
Wow.
Playing out there. We were more on the recruiting trail. We were pretty well known just as being identical twins, not so much for our golfing ability.
Hey, however they remember you, right? Yeah, it doesn't matter as long as you're recruiting me, right?
Yeah. So we both ended up out there. Had a great experience. I can't say enough about a lot of the administration that's still there at Creighton was there. Rasmussen, their AD, Kevin Sarver, Steve Brace. A lot of those people are still there and working. Lisa Chip. So I've had to get to stay in touch with them and bounce things off of them and stuff. And so again, can't say enough about my experience out there. Athletic guy, I wasn't that great. It's about, like a lot of our kids, everybody has that dream and aspiration of playing professionally. And a lot of our kids are stubborn in that kind of aspiration. And it takes a long time for it to dawn on them that, that professional sports future, at least competitively, is probably not in the cards. It was about my junior year. It kind of dawned on me that, the PGA Tour is probably not in my future. So I have to start looking for what I wanted to do. And I was a finance major, and it was one of those where I just wanted to best paying job I could get, and happened to be with a company, which was at the time was Harris Entertainment. It's now Caesars Entertainment. It's a gaming company. It's the largest gaming company in the world. It's a Fortune 500 company. Entered into an entry-level management program with them. Was very fortunate in that sense that, to work for such a large company and to grow when you're, 22, 23 years old by kind of my apex of my time there, which was less than 2 years. I a couple dozen people reporting to me, and most of which were, twice, sometimes 2.5, 3 times my age. Kind of, trial by fire there in terms of trying to garner their respect to some young kid coming in, trying to tell them what to do and how to follow the manual and things like that. So, about a year and a half in, I kind of started to feel like that wasn't, again, very appreciative of the experience, taught me how to be a manager, taught me how to work with people, grow people. But it wasn't for me. I wasn't happy doing what I was doing. And, I lost my father at a pretty young age. He passed away suddenly around that time at 47. But one of the last words he gave me of advice when I was kind of in that moment of, fight or flight in terms of what I wanted to do with my life, he asked me, all right, well, what were you most happy doing? And I was like, I was most happy when I was on campus.
Right.
And he's like, well, maybe that's what you should be doing. So unfortunately, he passed away a few weeks later, but that's something that's always stuck with me. And it's, so I ended up getting back to Ball State because obviously being from there, and, as you probably, being in the business, it's not the easiest business in the world to get into. And it can be tough. And sometimes it does come down to knowing people and getting that shot. And, for me, it was a mid-level manager at a large international corporation. I was making a good living. That shot was as a grad assistant in the ticket office. And, that was a tough pill to swallow, going from making, 50 some odd thousand a year to making $685 a month stipend, plus tuition at back home in Muncie. And that was tough. And, but it's what needed to be done in order to get in the business. And, I speak to a lot
to that. I mean, it's I had a pretty similar journey, and, if that sports lineage is in your blood, and, I think your father's advice was so astute and continues to live on today, where, if you're doing what you love, right, that starts to check off a lot of the boxes of mental health, of being happy, and, making an impact in a space where I might not be monetarily compensated the same way at Harrah's, but in that same vein, coming in and watching Ball State flourish, in the MAC. And I mean, you did some amazing things there on the ticket side. We're gonna dive into that, but that's tremendous, man. And it's, once you get back in the sports world, if being a former athlete, you feel like you can really impact people and athletes coming up in a way that maybe you can't do in the professional world, right? You have some reach, but here you have just such a prime time of life where you get to make an impact. Did you feel that as you sort of continued your professional lineage there?
Sure. Yeah. And that's one thing where when because you always had that kind of that moment where you got to decide. I know there are some people that have bounced back and forth between pro and college in terms of their, working. To me, professional sports always felt like you were, part of the owner. At the end of the day, that pro teams are the owner's speedboat. They're the little toy that you're just kind of along for the ride for. And honestly, it just didn't seem to me, I didn't feel much difference between, say working for the Indiana Pacers or something like that versus working for Harrah's Entertainment. It just kind of felt the same to me in terms of, it was a punch in, punch out, do your job, get to go to some games every now and then. But in terms of the interaction and what you're actually producing, because what do we produce in intercollegiate athletics? It's young men and women who go out into the world and put their mark on whatever it is that they touch. And I believe that what we produce, our student athletes, when they walk across that stage and get that diploma, what we produce, what we impart upon them through their many hours of work and that they put in on the field, in the classroom, in the community, and study halls, and all of practicing and whatnot, a great representative of society who is going to make place the world a better place. That's why we see our QPAs and GPAs are higher usually on amongst our student athlete bodies than they are than compared to general students. And when they go through interview processes, whatever it is their chosen profession is, I remember when I was going through those interview processes, we spent more time talking about my athletic experience than
Yep.
than anything else, because employers want to hire those guys because they know those people have a work ethic to them, and that they're able to multitask, and they're able to. And a big thing that we find in terms of that interest is work in groups, and work with people. And that's because that's in any company that's going to be integral to. And these guys are used to working in a team, whereas a lot of kids are used to just getting ahead themselves and at the impediment of others. Whereas, student athletes are used to working together and as a unit. And I got into this side of the business because I believe in that product. And I believe that my experience as a student athlete made me a better person. And I believe that the experiences that we provide those kids make them into better people. And pro sports just doesn't provide that, to me at least.
No, you're spot on. I share a lot of the same sentiment. And as I continue to grow and flourish as a professional in this world and trying to put my fingerprint on it, one of the things that comes up so often is this idea of legacy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you want to leave a legacy? How do you want to be remembered? What is your brand? And what a unique intersection to make a legacy on folks that are coming through your university and, make impressionable, just imprints on their life. And, as they go forward, the first podcast we did with Haven was, he was my associate athletic director at South Alabama. And so to think that almost 10 years removed, we're, now sitting down as adults and talking about problems like COVID and name, image, likeness, almost seemed dystopian if you would have told me that when I was starting. So,
yeah, well, and that's one where I was like, I look back to my time at Creighton where, and I'm not at all saying that professors are not important, that professors are integral and big parts of students' lives. But in terms of what, to me, at least in my personal experience, and I can tell you all kinds of things about my academic coordinator in athletics back at Creighton, the compliance person back at Creighton, who's now the SWA at Marquette, the business officer at the time, marketing people, all the associate ADs. I remember them. I know their names. I stayed in touch with them. There are professors whose names I remember. I don't stay in touch with them. But admins and coaches and all back to my spirit, I still stay in a lot of touch with, and I can remember very well because they imparted a lot upon me. Yeah. Because again, in athletics, there's just so much day in, day out interaction, as opposed to, say in the classroom where you're just, it's that 45 minutes, a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or hour 15, Tuesday, Thursday, and maybe a couple emails here and there. For athletics, you're so ingrained into the departments, and that's as a golfer. I wasn't that cool. It's not like I was Kyle Korver or Anthony Tolliver, and I'm some big marquee guy who's carrying the flagship of the school and the department. I was, I was just there to, have a good experience and get a good GPA.
Right. Set you up for the next phase. And it's amazing how much you still gain from that. And we're going to use that as a springboard into, talking athletics, because, obviously this has been one of the more bizarre years for athletics, from youth to pro and everything in between. And that's where we find, University of Dayton and the A10. Why don't you give our listeners just sort of a sneak peek behind the curtains of, what you guys are doing from a conference level, and then, some of the programs that you have in place to make sure the athletes are safe and their mental health is taken care of, just touching on some of those higher level concepts that COVID has, really exposed.
Sure. And, and obviously we've been dealing with this since, March of last year. And I was actually in New York City with our basketball team when the world kind of collapsed in on itself.
And you guys were on a path that was, with Obi, and that's got to be tough, right? To watch it just
and it really, and it cements what the impact is. I was down actually in our hotel lobby not when we got the final, hey, it's done, we're getting back on the plane and going home. But when we had the first announcement that for the A10 championship itself, and then the basketball championship was what we were there for, we were at the Hilton in Brooklyn, that fans could not attend.
Mm.
And from down in the lobby with a lot of our donors and ticket holders that were on the trip, because our fans travel very well, and a lot of what I do day in, day out, in season and out too. Right now I had some calls with some donors and ticket holders before I jumped on with you, is dealing with people. Most of my job is still very external facing. And a couple of the people, they're right there. So we break that news to them, and they literally started to cry, because it was such a special year, and they love the Flyers so much. And that'll always stick with me, that, because obviously most people can expect that to be a reaction from, certainly the student athletes, because they really feel like something was taken from them, that they had earned and worked so hard for. But to see it in your fans and how that impacts them, certainly see it on the dollar sign, what they're willing to spend to be a part of it, but then to see it so raw, that'll always stick with me. And then,
Wow.
it took a few months for us to get, used to that idea. And then it was just kind of this domino effect of, what's going to happen with spring sports. And then everybody on campus gets sent home. I think there was a bit of a bubble at first, honeymoon, I don't know what you want to call it, where people were a little numb, because it affected everybody. It didn't just affect athletes, it affected everybody. Everybody got sent home on campus. And so I think there was a little bit of solidarity that people had internally, that, hey, it's not just me, it's a lot of other people. But as time moved on and you started to get to points, because for a lot of us, and this was something we had, not, maybe some foresight, hopefully we'll never have to deal with something like this again, but a lot of us didn't take down stuff on our calendars. So we get 2-3 months down the road, and I start getting pinged, because like baseball is one of the sports that report to me. And I start getting pings that I should be in Richmond, Virginia at the A10 baseball tournament. I'm just like, I'm in home, and it comes up on our Amazon Alexa, like, hey, your flight. And I'm just like, yeah, I guess I didn't take that down. And it kind of, then
Daggers,
it hits you like,
daggers.
darn it. We were supposed to have a pretty darn good baseball team this last year. But, then, so it's kind of always been this ebb and flow, because then, a lot of ambiguity, what happens to my eligibility? And then the ruling comes that, granting the spring athletes that extra year of eligibility. And that became kind of a salve that people that were able to put on themselves and say, like, hey, I did get another year back. And we did have a number of people. We left it kind of open to our student athletes. Certainly there are students that were in situations where they had a great job offer. They got into their graduate school of choice and their program of choice. And so they're going to move on. So we had some sports where some kid, one sport in particular where all of them moved on and they graduated. But we had other sports where the overwhelming majority, if not all, of those students came back. We had a relatively light senior class in the spring sports. So I think it was like 13 or 14 student athletes that elected to come back for another year, and we allowed them, and paid, obviously there's a financial expense to that, because I know there's some schools that said, now we're just not going to get into that. And
It's bizarre, I mean, and each, as we're going through this series, we're featuring folks from, mid-major to Power 5, and then all the way down to junior college. And, we're finding that each university really handles it differently, right? Like and I think that's been one of the more challenging things, just me as a person, is like, where's the center of truth right now? What logic do we work off of? And I mean, are you guys experiencing that with, from the conference to the NCAA and, some of those ripple effects?
Sure. Because, anytime you're in a leadership position, whether it's we were just on a call yesterday with our head coaches, and for us, our student athletes are used to coming to us with like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or what's the deal with this, or can you answer this? And we can't really provide any answers, which is like, I don't know. I can give you best case, a range of maybes, but because again, things keep changing. We were full go, probably 10 days ago, got everybody back on campus August 24th, in-person classes. And then that Sunday, right before the 23rd, nope, we're going up a level in terms of our threat level with the pandemic. We're going up a level. That means classes are still starting, but they're remote. You can stay on campus, but there's no in-person classes. Then we've gone up a level and up a level and up a level. Now we're to this level where we're kind of in a shelter in place, and all group activity is ceased, even practices and things like that. And that's where, again, in the course of a week, we've gone from getting ready and we had a couple of teams have a few practices. I watched our volleyball team have again, very different practice than I'm used to seeing. Is it's all 6 people, it's spread out, and it's very contactless, and but they were excited. And I was excited because and the coaches were excited because we actually get to see and interact with the kids, and you could tell that. And then that in the course of 7 days is completely, turned around, and they're stuck in their dorms again. So, we actually had a call yesterday with all of our head coaches, talking about because we keep hearing and not just the athletes, but the coaches too, are, different words like struggling and distressed, and, so, reaching out to them to say hey, what are we doing? What can you not do? What can you do? And then along the lines of what can you do, what are we doing to make sure that people are taken care of? So a lot of that was, we have a staff psychologist, sports psychologist, so reinforcing hey, Dr. Cook's available to you. We have a great counseling center here. The counseling center is available to you all. And then, getting into, Zoom's great, but you can only Zoom so much before it just kind of loses its effectiveness. So what are we doing in addition to that? So our men's soccer team did a karaoke contest.
That's cool.
I thought that was pretty cool. Our softball team's doing kind of a scavenger hunt contest. What are those, a minute to win it kind of contests and things like that, where a lot of because again, with our unique housing situation on campus, a lot of our student athletes live together in their own houses, campus houses, and apartments and whatnot. So, which house can come up with the best? I think they had a Christmas tree contest, the best theme, not Christmas, obviously. We're in August, not Christmas, but who come up with the best tree design and things like that. And so what can we do creatively to interact with the kids and make them feel, because they're student athletes, a lot of the athlete portion got taken away from them. So, they're in the same boat as a lot of students. Well, a lot of students, their resources and who they have to lean on, parents, professor to maybe an advisor on campus. But our student athletes, even though, again, a lot of that stuff's been taken away from them, they still have their coaches. And then those coaches are still there for them and reinforcing that, hey, yes, I know you all want to be with them and interacting with them, but you can still be there for them and be a rock for them and a place for them to, a sounding board for them to get off the chest, whatever it is that they're bothered with. And what is bothering them, and it's bothering everybody, is the ambiguity and the unknowns out there. And for us, at least, the hope is that, at least getting back to in-person classes will come here in the next few weeks. As we talked about in the call, we're a little different than a lot of campuses where they're just testing symptomatic people. We're doing 1,000 students a week of surveillance testing in addition to testing symptomatic students. So we're turning up a lot of cases that a lot of campuses aren't. So the numbers look like, oh my gosh, but all we know is we are identifying kids faster and easier to prevent symptomatic cases in the future and hopefully return back to some normalcy. Notre Dame, which is we feel is a peer of ours in terms of enrollment size and breadth of their institution, in terms of looking at their student enrollment numbers. They're about a week or so ahead of us in terms of that, student return process, and we're starting to see their numbers in their dashboard going down. So good. We're doing a lot of the same measures. So our hope is that we'll continue to see with that, because for us, and a lot of students, Alabama, and all, you've seen these pictures and video on the nightly news of parties and our kids have been doing really well. They we do have a bit of a culture, that kind of culture here, because of the student neighborhoods and the neighborhood parties, and you don't have to search YouTube long to find videos of that stuff.
Kids party in college, Adam? Is that?
Yeah, I know, right? Who would have thought? But our kids have been really good. We've had a couple hot spots here and there, but we're addressing those just like any other campus, and told our student athletes too. They're not going to get any special treatment if they are found violating their COVID agreement and are having a party or doing stuff, not cooperating with contact tracers. They're going to get sent home, just like any other kid.
And I mean, that's that's just the sheer reality of where we're at in 2020. And it's interesting. You bring up so many great points there. And I think one of the more fascinating ones is when you talk about the relationship with technology, right? You can only do so many Zoom calls. And what's interesting is when you start to talk to the coaches and their experience through this, or the more seasoned athletic directors who are a few generations older versus the athletes that are actually coming through and going through this. A lot of them are already absorbed in this technology, right? You were born with almost a cell phone in your hand. You don't know any different. And so, the adoption of this virtual lifestyle seems to be very different, depending on, where you're at in this journey of life. And, really curious, as an athletic department, we see that budgets are just becoming so much tighter, and we're really trying to squeeze the juice. What technologies are you guys leaning on over there to help facilitate and streamline the process, just to make sure that you're communicating in the same medium with your athletes?
Sure. Yeah. And that's obviously something, a very astute point in the sense that, some of our coaches are, a bit, from a different generation, and they're not used to, talked about Zoom a little bit, or something like StreamYard or FaceTime or whatever it is, a video feature, very easy for kids to pick up and get going with. Whereas I can't tell you how many Zoom meetings and stuff we've had, especially with some of our coaches, where you're not on mute. You're on mute. Somebody please you get dogs barking in the background. You're like, can somebody, especially the larger calls. And, so it's taken some growth and stuff. We've been pretty, we're a pretty integrated campus electronically in terms of our, we're a Google school. So, we've had, which is a great feature for us. All of our programs, we try not to be, too, when it comes to technology, because there are products out there that are very sport specific, and there are certainly things that coaches, whether it be from a schedule keeping standpoint, communication standpoint, record keeping standpoint, mass communication, changing the practice schedules in real time, document procurement, all kinds of things that they, video, big one, recruiting, right now with the recruiting dead period keeps getting extended, and now guys are coming to us and saying, hey, I need this and that because I'm not allowed. I need to look at this video service, and I need to watch this kid. And in fact, that's a good, in terms of the one I've seen, probably the most predominant are those recruiting video services, to where guys can't go out, and with budgets being, and again, our coaches, their operating budgets are what their operating budgets have been. The issue is a cash flow issue. It's
Correct.
They might be able to see what your budget is, but there's no cash behind that to actually go and spend, at least right now, until we're sure that our revenue streams for campus and athletically, we're one of the most revenue self-sufficient departments in the country.
Wow.
We support, people are used to seeing, FCS, I think standard is around 20 cents on the dollar. For FCS schools, we're about 75, anywhere 70 to 80 cents on the dollar. So
wow.
And so for us, our big question mark is, and most of that revenue comes from men's basketball for us. So the big question mark for us is, can fans attend or not? And will they be buying tickets and, buying beer at the concession stands and doing, doing whatnot. But, so we get those buttoned up. It's actually, some of these technology features are actually cheaper than some of the stuff. So it's like, I look at the coach's recruiting budget, and the dead period keeps extending. It's like, well, I'd rather pay this for this recruiting service so you can watch all this video of all these kids than spend all this money on airfare and rental cars and certainly AAU fees to go watch some of these tournaments. You're like, how much do you need to pay to go watch this kid play
for one digital book? And that's it'll make you reevaluate, right? And
now they're getting these services and getting to watch these kids. Now, would they still prefer to be going out? And would we still prefer them to be going out? Because until you can actually get out there and see kids in person and have those interactions, and not just with the parents and the coaches and the players, but the other coaches you're competing against on the recruiting trail, you do pick up stuff anecdotally on kids. that you maybe wouldn't be able to just sitting in your office watching the video. So yes, are we going to go back to, are we just going to completely go digital and not send coaches and recruiting? No, but we're actually at least right now, with what we're allowed to do from the NCAA, we're saving money. And and we're also finding too from a technology savings in other areas. But yeah, certainly budgets are very tight, and we're trying to we weren't immune to the furlough layoff kind of paradigm that you saw kind of early on, and hopefully that's something we can as a campus, we did our part in furloughing, because a lot of our people in our business are tied to events. If you're not having events, then what are you marketing? What information from an SID standpoint are you generating? If you have an event services manager, if there's no events, what are they doing? So, I feel like we did our part early on as a campus to kind of get ourselves in a better position, where I think a lot of other schools maybe waited and to see if things could get better on their own. And, so that's going to help us in the long term. But again, for us, specifically in athletics at the University of Dayton, men's basketball is going to be the big question mark for us.
Man, and so for sure, right? For sure. And I'm curious. You touch on so many topics, and you guys had just an enormous potential with this upcoming basketball season, and with name, image, likeness on the horizon, and having a presence like Obi on the team, right? That would really generate that. I'm curious, forward thinking outside of the current situation we're in right now. How are the discussions still taking place around name, image, likeness, and how are you guys handling that in tandem with some of the other shakeups that COVID's producing?
Sure, and that's one where obviously the final legislation is not out yet, but we all kind of see the train coming down the tracks on that, and are supportive of it, and that our student athletes, because there's always been the difference, right? The people that are generating purely off of their their athletic ability, like an Obi would, and there's others out there, those classic cases, the Jeremy Blooms and the kicker down, I believe, at UCF, the YouTube, or there's the music, I think maybe he was
an artist,
yeah. So those are always ones we were always kind of like, yeah, come on, like I get the dots that are connected in terms of how that links towards amateurism, but we are as an institution supportive of that legislation, and so we're just going to sit back and wait to see what that exactly is. But we are being proactive and working with our Senior Society for External on building some education and programming for our kids, all of our kids. Not certainly, obviously, the Obi Toppins of the world would generate a lot on their own, and not a lot that they would even really have to do all that much for, because those big names, they're just all they were really gonna have to do are just lend their name to the social media landscape, and that money will just get generated just off their name alone and their accomplishments alone. But beyond that, towards student athletes as a whole, whether it's a women's soccer player that's now who's from a really small town where they're kind of a local celebrity, now they're able to go back home and have a Jane Doe camp and make $1,000 where that would have been illegal, or lend their name and their image. And now I think the thing that will go into the education is like, okay, you like in pro sports, yeah, you can go do that, but you're just not going to have a Dayton Flyers jersey on when you're doing it, because that's that's our mark. Just same way that professional athletes are, you see them in those ads and they're wearing the black and white generic basketball jersey with their number on it, but you can't see Lakers or Brewers or whatever on their uniforms, because those institutions, just like us, we have our own partners and
naming rights and everything there. So
so the education and kind of tying back to what we were talking about in terms of the health and mental well-being of our kids, and they're struggling right now and no practice, and they want to get out there and doing something. That's one of the things that we talked about on with our coaches, is like putting that programming together to be able to put in front of them is again, it's maybe not taking the place as practice, but it's at least engaging with them in another way in terms of their personal growth and development. I don't think they're quite called this anymore, but when I was a student athlete, the old champs life skills seminars.
Yep.
And we all got to go through and
went through them.
Yeah. And, but kind of build that programming for ourselves, and because there's going to be a lot more beyond that, to where, kids that maybe, aren't used to having money now will have money. Well, there's financial literacy that, speaking back to me as a finance major, there's financial literacy that's involved with that in terms of paying taxes and implications of what they might be, and being smart with their money too. And so building that programming up is important to us. So yeah, we're working on that, getting that here, hopefully out here soon to them, so we can start engaging with them, because once that stuff's out there, especially for the Obi Toppins of the world, who, again, they will have firms that are in the social media space that all will say is, hey, we just signed this deal with us and we're going to attach your name with these brands, and the money's just going to flow in. Again, that's going to be a very small portion of kids out there. But that will hit once that legislation's passed, that'll hit very quickly for them. So they're going to need to be prepared for that.
And I couldn't agree more. And it's exciting to think that, the NCAA really was that freight, or that cruise ship, right? And when you were trying to make iterations or amendments to it, it moved and turned really slow. And so to watch COVID come and just sort of blow up everything, and now we're having to evolve and think on our feet and figure out new ways, I think that almost clears the path for a name, image, likeness, for a more open mind, and for, new ways to go ahead and really create an environment that is both symbiotic for the university and the athlete, and make sure that we elevate those two in parallel, in unison, instead of, leaving one behind. So, great insight there. This has been chock full of nuggets. Adam, as we wind down, I have one more question for you, and this is outside of University of Dayton, directed totally at you. So, in transparency, it used to be a dating question for me, but now I'm married, so it's all networking now.
Okay.
So Adam, if you could let our listeners know one thing that you've done in your life that you would recommend they do or experience in theirs, what would that be and why?
Wow, that's a good one. So, I will say, probably the biggest thing for me, again, everybody's different, and I don't want to put, I don't, everybody's going to have their own, I have a twin brother who is not married, has no kids, and he's happy living his life. But, for me, the biggest game changer is my family. I've been married for 9 years. We have 3 amazing children, Grayson, Hadley, and Harper. And, they've really, they're the biggest impact on my life. And not just what I do for a living, but just who I am. And, I couldn't imagine doing what I do for a living without them. And, so they do take a big part of, it's an interesting dynamic, because, there's people out there that just do their jobs versus, they have their families, and their jobs are just kind of that 9-to-5 deal. And, whatever it is else in their life, it kind of revolves around that. To have a job in an industry that you love, and a family that you adore and you love, and have both of those at the same time, they're going to mix and intermingle. And, so, certainly not telling people just say, yeah, make sure you go out and, get married and have kids, and that would be, I'm not gonna kind of necessarily, but have something in your life that is beyond just what you do professionally, that has meaning. And for me, it's my family, and it's something I've been able to imbue, especially doing what we do for a living, where we are involved with, I know there's people out there that say these 18 to 22-year-olds are adults, and, but we do see them as our kids by extension in some ways. And, because we do see the decisions they make on basis, and they're like, hey, now don't do that, don't do this. And, but, I have found, with a lot of the stuff that we do, and everything we try to do is for the health and well-being of our student athletes, but it's created a lot of empathy in me for, you sit back and say, man, what if that was your kid? And it's like the difference of having children versus not. And I can sit back and say, hey, that's, how would I want to, as a parent, how would I want to tackle that situation? It does provide a lot of empathy for you in terms of relating to, those kids and their families and their parents and their situations. Plus, it's kind of cool. I get a lot of joy. My kids bringing them to games and on trips and letting them be on the field and interact with the student, and just like when I was a kid growing up.
Yep.
And, they kind of feel like they're pretty cool sometimes when they get to, go on the court or interact with a kid, and so a lot of great memories so far, and which also does make up for the fact that you do travel a lot and you do get pulled away from your family a lot. So that makes those moments all that much more special.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Well, if there was one through line here, Adam, I think I would pull out legacy. I think that you've absorbed and you're continuing to pioneer, your father's legacy, and, from Ball State to University of Dayton, Neil Sullivan has got a amazing right-hand man with yourself. So on that note, man, thank you again for hopping on the podcast with us. There were a ton of nuggets in here. We're going to be posting this here over the next week, so we'll attach Adam's handles. If you guys are looking to learn more about University of Dayton, feel free to check them out as they're going through, this shakeup. And Adam, best of luck with the upcoming seasons, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much, Guy. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to watching more of your podcast. This is great stuff.